Picture this. You are 68 years old, sitting at a little plastic table outside a bakery in Dumaguete. It is 7 in the morning. The air is already warm, but not heavy yet. A tricycle rattles past with a blue tarp tied over the side. Somewhere behind me, a woman is sweeping the pavement with one of those short handmade brooms, and every few seconds I hear the soft scrape of the bristles against concrete. In front of me is a cup of coffee that cost less than $1 and a plate with 2 warm pieces of pandesal. Across the street, a schoolboy is trying to balance a backpack, an umbrella, and a paper bag of breakfast all at once. And I am thinking about Costa Rica, not because I wish I were there, because for nearly 4 years, Costa Rica was the plan. The spreadsheet said Costa Rica. The retirement forums said Costa Rica. The glossy videos with green mountains, clean little towns, and smiling American couples said Costa Rica. I had a folder on my laptop called Final Move. Inside that folder were rental listings, health insurance quotes, residency notes, cost comparisons, and a list of towns I planned to visit: Atenas, Grisha, San Ramon, Lake Arenal. I had it all mapped out. Then I discovered Dumaguete. My name is Robert Mercer. I am 68 years old. I grew up outside Columbus, Ohio, and I spent 39 years working in commercial insurance. Not the glamorous kind. Warehouses, trucking companies, manufacturing plants, liability renewals. Most of my life was deadlines, policy language, phone calls, and telling people why the thing they thought was covered was not actually covered. I was good at it. That mattered to me. For a long time, being good at my job was how I measured whether I was doing all right. I was not the loudest person in the room. I was not the guy who took over meetings or told the best stories. But I knew my accounts. I returned calls. I caught mistakes before they became expensive. My wife, Linda, used to say I treated every grocery receipt like an audit. She was right. We were married for 34 years. She died 6 years before I retired. Pancreatic cancer. 7 months from diagnosis to funeral. There are losses that come like a storm, loud and violent, and there are losses that quietly remove the shape of your life. Linda's death did both. At first, there were appointments, medications, family calls, paperwork, people bringing casseroles. Then all of that stopped, and I was left in a house where every object had a memory attached to it. Her mug was still in the cabinet. Her gardening gloves were still on the shelf by the back door. For months, I kept buying the yogurt she liked. I did not even eat yogurt. I know that sounds foolish, but grief makes you do strange things because your hands keep following routines your heart cannot accept are over. I worked 2 more years after she died. Maybe I should have retired sooner. Maybe work saved me. I still do not know. What I do know is that when I finally left, I expected relief. Instead, I felt erased. My colleagues gave me a watch. There was a cake in the conference room. People said things like, "Now you can finally relax," and "You earned this." Then Monday morning came. No alarm, no emails. No one needed an answer from me. That sounds like freedom when you are exhausted. It can feel like disappearance when your whole identity has been built around being useful. I was living alone in a 3-bedroom house that cost me more every year to maintain. Property taxes had gone up. Insurance had gone up. The furnace was old. The roof had maybe 5 years left. My Social Security and pension covered my life, but not comfortably. Every surprise expense felt like a warning: a new transmission, a dental crown, a storm-damaged fence. One thing at a time, none of them catastrophic. Put them together, and they begin to change how you sleep. My monthly retirement income after taxes was about $4,100. $4,100. In Ohio, that was enough to survive. It did not feel like enough to breathe. My daughter, Megan, wanted me to move closer to her in North Carolina. She meant well. She and her husband had 2 kids, full-time jobs, soccer practice, school events, and a life already moving at full speed. They found a senior apartment complex 20 minutes from their house. I toured it. The hallways smelled like carpet cleaner and reheated soup. The apartment had beige walls, beige cabinets, beige carpet, and a narrow balcony facing the parking lot. The manager kept using the word community, community room, community calendar, community shuttle. I stood in that empty apartment and had a thought I was ashamed to admit. This is where they put you when your real life is finished. That was not fair. Plenty of good people lived there. It was clean. It was safe. Megan was trying to help. But I was not ready to become a weekly obligation on my daughter's calendar. I wanted to be part of her life, not something she had to manage. So I started looking abroad. Costa Rica came first because it seemed reasonable, close to the United States, familiar expat communities, mountains, good private health care, a climate that looked like permanent spring. I did not wake up one morning and decide to move to another country. I tried everything else first. I met with a financial planner. I looked at downsizing. I considered renting out the house and moving into a smaller place. I checked towns in Tennessee, South Carolina, and northern Georgia. I even looked at seasonal living, 6 months somewhere warm and 6 months near family. Every option had a catch. The cheaper towns were becoming less cheap. The nice retirement areas had homeowners association fees, rising insurance costs, or property taxes that made no sense to me. Renting in a decent area was often more expensive than my mortgage had been. Costa Rica kept coming back to the top of the list. For nearly 4 years, I researched it. I joined Facebook groups. I watched videos about residency. I compared the Central Valley to the coast. I read arguments about rainy season, imported food prices, private hospitals, driving, crime, and whether you really needed to learn Spanish. I made 3 scouting trips. The first trip was exciting. Everything felt possible because I was not there long enough for anything to become difficult. The second trip was more practical. I looked at rentals, talked to an attorney, visited a private clinic, and spent time in a town I thought might work. The third trip made me hesitate. Prices had climbed. The furnished house I liked was now listed at $1,600 a month. A decent used car cost more than I expected. Imported groceries were expensive. The areas that felt comfortable to me were not the bargain I had pictured. Costa Rica was still possible. But the numbers no longer gave me the feeling I wanted. I was not looking for luxury. I was looking for margin. That is a word people do not use enough in retirement. Margin. The space between what comes in and what goes out. The room to handle a hospital bill, a flight home, a broken appliance, or a bad month without panic. Costa Rica gave me a lifestyle I could afford if everything went according to plan. I wanted a place where life could go wrong once in a while, and I would still be fine. The Philippines entered my life by accident. One night, I was watching a video about retirement visas in Central America. When it ended, another video started automatically. It showed an older American man walking along a seaside boulevard somewhere in the Philippines. I almost clicked away. I knew nothing about the Philippines beyond history, military bases, and the fact that English was widely spoken. The man in the video stopped at a small restaurant and ordered breakfast. He talked about rent, electricity, health care, and getting around without a car. Then he said his monthly rent, 22,000 pesos. At the time, that was around $400. I assumed the place had to be terrible. It was not. It was simple but clean. 1 bedroom, air conditioning, a little kitchen, a covered terrace, and a gate. I watched another video, then another. Famous last words, I know. By 2 in the morning, I had 6 browser tabs open and a page of handwritten notes. The place was Dumaguete. I had never heard of it. What caught my attention was not the scenery, though the waterfront looked pleasant. It was the ordinary rhythm of the place. People were not presenting it like paradise. They were going to the market, paying electric bills, getting prescriptions, taking ferries, complaining about internet service, and eating lunch. It looked livable. That mattered more to me than perfect. Over the next 3 months, I researched Dumaguete with the same obsessive energy I had given Costa Rica. I joined expat groups. I read posts from people who loved it and people who hated it. I searched hospital reviews. I looked at flood maps. I watched videos about brownouts, heat, traffic, bureaucracy, stray dogs, visa extensions, and the difference between living in the city and living farther out in Valencia or Bacong. I did not want salesmanship. I wanted complaints. Complaints tell you what daily life actually costs. The more I learned, the more curious I became. English was used almost everywhere. Private health care was available. There was an established expat population, but the city did not seem built entirely around foreigners. I could live without a car. The pace looked slower, and the numbers gave me something Costa Rica had stopped giving me: margin. I booked a 30-day trip. Megan thought I had lost my mind. "The Philippines?" she said. "Dad, that is on the other side of the world." She was right. The flight was long. Columbus to Chicago, Chicago to Seoul, Seoul to Cebu, then another flight to Dumaguete. By the time I arrived, I had been awake so long that the airport felt unreal. The first thing I noticed was the heat. Not warm. Heat that wrapped around my head like a wet towel. The second thing I noticed was the noise. Motorcycles, tricycles, horns, dogs, roosters, people calling to one another. My hotel room was smaller than it looked online. The shower pressure was weak. The air conditioner sounded like a lawnmower. I sat on the bed that first night, sweating through my shirt, and thought, "Robert, you have made a very expensive mistake." Then morning came. I walked to Rizal Boulevard just after sunrise. The water was pale silver. People were jogging, vendors were setting up, and groups of older men were sitting on benches talking as if they had nowhere else they needed to be. I bought coffee and eggs at a small place near the boulevard. The waitress called me sir. Not in a fake, polished resort way, just naturally. When I asked a question about transportation, she stepped outside and pointed down the street until I understood where to go. Later that day, I took a tricycle to see a rental in Valencia. The ride cost 150 pesos, less than $3. The apartment was behind a family home on a quiet road with banana trees along one side. It had one bedroom, a tiled living room, a small kitchen, air conditioning in the bedroom, and a covered porch. The owner wanted 24,000 pesos a month, furnished, 24,000 pesos. At the exchange rate then, about $430. Internet was extra, electricity was extra, water was almost nothing. I stood on that porch listening to rain hit the metal awning and felt the first real shift inside me. This was not a vacation fantasy. This was a workable life. I spent the rest of the month testing that idea. I went to a dentist for a cleaning and an X-ray. I visited a private hospital. I bought groceries at Robinson's and at the public market. I learned which imported products were expensive and which local alternatives were better anyway. I learned that cheese could cost too much, mangoes could cost almost nothing, and the best meal of the week might come from a place with plastic chairs and no printed menu. I learned that plans were suggestions. A tricycle driver might say 5 minutes and mean 20. A repairman might arrive tomorrow, or tomorrow might mean another day entirely. I learned to carry small bills. I learned that sidewalks could disappear without warning. I learned that a brownout can turn a quiet afternoon into a very sweaty lesson about backup fans. And I learned that I was not invisible. That part surprised me most. In Ohio, retirement had made my world smaller. Here, simply being new forced me to engage. I had to ask questions. I had to listen. I had to admit when I did not understand. At a coffee shop, I met a retired teacher from Oregon named Paul. He had lived in Dumaguete for 9 years. He did not sell me a dream. He told me exactly what irritated him. Traffic was worse than it used to be. Rent was rising. Some foreigners came looking for a fantasy and became bitter when reality did not cooperate. Medical care was good for routine needs, he said, but for certain serious conditions, he would go to Cebu or Manila. Then he looked at me and said, "The place works if you stop demanding that it behave like America." That sentence stayed with me. I had spent years trying to find a cheaper version of my old life. Dumaguete was not that. It was a different life. That distinction saved me from making a lot of mistakes. I returned to Ohio after 30 days and did not sell my house immediately. I gave myself 6 months. I built a real budget. Rent, 24,000 pesos. Electricity, 6,000 in hot months, sometimes less. Internet, 1,800. Food, 25,000, depending on how often I bought imported items. Transportation, 5,000. Health insurance and medical savings, set aside separately. Visa costs, flights, emergency fund, and a generous allowance for the things I was forgetting. My projected monthly spending came to around $2,100, not $900, not the fantasy budget some people advertise online, $2,100. That still left me roughly $2,000 of monthly margin. For the first time in years, I could see a retirement where one bad surprise did not control the next 6 months. I sold the house the following spring. Megan cried when we packed Linda's things. So did I. I kept her mug. I kept the gardening gloves, too, though I still do not know why. I moved to Dumaguete with 2 suitcases, 1 carry-on, and more fear than I admitted to anyone. That was 14 months ago. I will not tell you every day has been easy. The distance from family is real. A video call is not the same as sitting at Megan's kitchen table. When my grandson broke his arm, I hated being so far away. The heat still drains me. Paperwork can be maddening. There are days when I miss quiet roads, familiar grocery stores, and knowing exactly how everything works. But there are also mornings like this one. Coffee outside a bakery, a warm breeze. A woman at the next table who recognizes me and asks whether I am going to the market later. A landlord who brings over bananas from his brother's farm. A doctor who spends 20 minutes explaining my blood pressure medication instead of staring at a computer screen. A group of men who invite me to lunch, even when I say I am not hungry. My life here is not luxurious. It is spacious. There is a difference. I rent a comfortable 1-bedroom place now for 26,000 pesos a month. I pay for a cleaning woman twice a week. I eat out several times a week. I take short trips. I keep a proper emergency fund. I fly home when I need to. And I no longer check my bank account before buying a replacement appliance. That may not sound dramatic. At 68, peace is often made of very ordinary things. A paid bill, a full refrigerator, a doctor you can call. Enough money left over to help your grandson with college someday. People ask whether I regret spending so much time planning for Costa Rica. I do not. Costa Rica taught me what I was looking for. Dumaguete taught me why. I was not looking for beaches. I was not looking for cheap beer or some late-life adventure story. I was looking for dignity. I was looking for a place where retirement did not feel like a slow surrender. I was looking for enough margin to make choices instead of reacting to bills. Most of all, I was looking for a reason to feel useful again. That happened in small ways. Helping my landlord's nephew practice English for a job interview. Showing Paul how to organize his medical receipts. Calling Megan every Sunday and actually having stories to tell her, learning people's names, being expected somewhere. Belonging is not always a grand emotional moment. Sometimes it is the bakery owner seeing you walk in and pouring your coffee before you order. So here I am, 68 years old, sitting at a plastic table in Dumaguete. The tricycles are getting louder now. The schoolboy across the street has finally managed to organize his umbrella and breakfast. The woman with the broom has finished sweeping and is talking to someone through an open window. My coffee is nearly gone. 4 years of planning pointed me toward Costa Rica. One accidental video brought me here. And for the first time since Linda died, my life does not feel like something that ended. It feels like something I am still allowed to build.